The baby shower was supposed to be a simple affair. Pink balloons, finger sandwiches, and polite conversation about nursery themes. Instead, I found myself standing in the corner of Melissa's living room, gripping my glass of sparkling cider, so tightly I thought it might shatter, while she regaled our co-workers with the story of how she'd stolen my life. "You should have seen Nora's face when they announced I got the senior developer position," Melissa giggled, one hand resting on her 8 months pregnant belly. She'd been so sure it was hers. 6 months she spent training me, explaining every little detail about the analytics framework. Poor thing didn't realize she was training her replacement. I'm Nora Sullivan, 29, and until 3 months ago, I was the lead developer on the most innovative project my company, Wellington Technologies, had ever undertaken. Now I was watching my former mentee take credit for my work at her baby shower, surrounded by colleagues who wouldn't meet my eyes. "Tell them about the algorithm," Jessica from HR encouraged, clearly uncomfortable, but trying to keep the party atmosphere light. "The one that got you the promotion." Melissa's eyes sparkled with malicious delight. "Oh, the predictive modeling algorithm? The one that's going to save the company millions?" Nora walked me through it step by step. She actually thought she was being helpful. She laughed again, that tinkling sound that I'd once found charming. I documented everything she showed me, then presented it to the board as my own innovation. They were so impressed. But wasn't that? Amy from accounting started, then stopped herself. "Wasn't that what?" Melissa challenged. "Nora's work? Please. Ideas belong to whoever's smart enough to capitalize on them. If she'd wanted credit, she should have presented it herself instead of being too shy to speak up in meetings." My cheeks burned. I hadn't been too shy. I'd been on medical leave for a severe kidney infection when the board meeting happened. Melissa had known that. She'd visited me in the hospital, brought me flowers, and promised to hold down the fort until I returned. "Besides," Melissa continued, adjusting the mommy-to-be sash across her designer dress, "it's not like she needs the money. She's single, no kids, lives in that tiny apartment. I have a baby on the way. I deserved that promotion more." Deserved? The word escaped before I could stop it. The room went quiet. Melissa turned to me with mock surprise. "Oh, Nora, I didn't see you there. Still lurking in corners, I see. That's probably why you never advance, no presence." "I trained you," I said quietly. "I mentored you. When you started, you couldn't even run a basic Python script. And I'm grateful," she said with false sweetness. "You were an adequate teacher. But let's be honest, you lack vision. You're a worker bee, not a queen. Someone had to take those little code snippets you showed me and turn them into something actually valuable." "Little code snippets?" My voice rose. "I created an entire predictive analytics framework from scratch. It took me 2 years to develop the mathematical models alone, which you never would have pitched properly," Melissa waved dismissively. "I did you a favor. At least now the algorithm will actually be implemented instead of gathering dust on your hard drive. The algorithm that's going to revolutionize our demand forecasting?" A new voice cut through the tension. "The one my husband hasn't stopped talking about for weeks?" Everyone turned. A woman in her 50s stood in the doorway, elegant in understated designer wear. I didn't recognize her, but something about her presence commanded attention. Melissa's face went white, then red. "Mrs. Wellington. I didn't know you were coming." Mrs. Wellington, the CEO's wife. My stomach dropped. "Patricia invited me," Mrs. Wellington said smoothly, referencing Melissa's sister-in-law who was hosting. "She mentioned you worked at my husband's company. I was curious to meet the brilliant mind behind this algorithm Douglas keeps raving about." Melissa preened, her confidence returning. "Well, I'm just happy to contribute to the company's success. Innovation is so important, don't you think?" "Absolutely," Mrs. Wellington agreed, accepting a glass of cider from Patricia. "Tell me about the development process. Douglas mentioned it uses some revolutionary approach to data clustering." "Oh yes," Melissa launched in, using the technical terms I'd taught her but clearly not understanding them. "It employs dynamic clustering with predictive weights based on historical patterns." She was reciting, word for word, from the documentation I'd written. My documentation that she'd claimed as her own. "Fascinating," Mrs. Wellington murmured. "And the part about the self-correcting bias detection?" Melissa faltered. Yes, the bias detection. It's very advanced." "How does it work, exactly?" Mrs. Wellington pressed. Douglas was particularly interested in that component. The room was silent. Melissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The bias detection was the most complex part of the algorithm, something I'd developed after discovering flaws in traditional models. I'd never written it down, had only explained it verbally to Melissa during one of our sessions. It's quite technical, Melissa stammered. I'm sure Nora could explain it, Mrs. Wellington said mildly, turning to me. You were Melissa's mentor, weren't you? Every eye in the room turned to me. This was it, my moment to expose everything. But looking at Melissa, 8 months pregnant, surrounded by baby gifts, I hesitated. The bias detection uses a dual-layer verification system, I said slowly. The first layer identifies potential biases in the input data by comparing against a baseline dataset. The second layer runs parallel predictions using different demographic weights to ensure the output isn't skewed by hidden variables. Brilliant, Mrs. Wellington said. And how did you come up with that approach? I noticed our traditional models were consistently underestimating demand in certain zip codes, I explained, warming to the subject. When I dug deeper, I realized the historical data we were using reflected old biases. Stores in minority neighborhoods had been understocked for years, creating artificially low demand numbers. The algorithm needed to account for suppressed demand, not just recorded sales. That's exactly what Douglas said, Mrs. Wellington exclaimed. He was impressed by the social consciousness built into the technology. Said it was the kind of innovative thinking that would take Wellington Technologies into the future. Melissa had gone very quiet. Around us, our colleagues shifted uncomfortably, the truth hanging in the air like a banner. Melissa, Mrs. Wellington continued conversationally, I'm curious about something. In your presentation to the board, you mentioned developing this algorithm over 2 years. But you've only been with the company for 18 months. How did you manage that? The silence was deafening. Melissa's hand went to her belly, a protective gesture. I misspoke, she said weakly. I meant. And another thing, Mrs. Wellington pulled out her phone. Douglas showed me the commit history from your GitHub repository. Very impressive. Though I did notice something odd. All the major commits were made from Nora's account, then suddenly switched to yours 3 months ago. Right around the time of her hospitalization, according to HR records. My jaw dropped. They'd investigated. They knew. I can explain, Melissa started. Please do, Mrs. Wellington said pleasantly. Explain how you accessed a colleague's private repository while she was in the hospital. Explain how you copied her code, her documentation, her entire project. Explain how you presented 2 years of someone else's work as your own to get a promotion and a significant raise. It wasn't like that, Melissa protested. Nora gave me access. She asked me to maintain the code while she was sick. I asked you to run the weekly tests, I said quietly. Not to steal my life's work. You weren't using it properly. Melissa burst out. You were too timid to present it, too scared to take credit. I saw an opportunity. You saw a colleague in a hospital bed and thought, perfect timing, Mrs. Wellington finished. Tell me, did you visit Nora in the hospital before or after you downloaded her files? Melissa's face crumpled. Around us, the baby shower guests were frozen, gifts forgotten, games abandoned. My husband values innovation, Mrs. Wellington continued. But he values integrity more. Wellington Technologies was built on trust, collaboration, and proper attribution of ideas. What you've done violates every principle this company stands for. Please, Melissa whispered. I'm about to have a baby. I need this job. You should have thought of that before committing intellectual property theft, Mrs. Wellington replied. Though I suppose I should thank you for one thing. Your bragging made it very easy to identify the real innovator in this room. She turned to me. Nora, I believe my husband will want to speak with you first thing Monday morning. About your algorithm, your future with the company, and the appropriate compensation for what you've created. I couldn't form words. As for you, she turned back to Melissa, I'd suggest updating your resume. And perhaps consulting a lawyer. Corporate theft of intellectual property is a serious matter. Criminal in some cases. You can't do this, Melissa cried. Nora, tell her. Tell her you gave me permission. I looked at her, this woman I'd trusted, mentored, called a friend. Who'd brought me soup when I was sick, who'd celebrated with me when I'd finally cracked the algorithm, who'd then stolen it all without a second thought. I gave you permission to maintain the testing environment, I said clearly. I have the email trail to prove it. I never gave you permission to steal my work, claim credit for my innovations, or use my hospitalization to advance your career. This is vindictive, Melissa accused. You're just jealous because I'm married and pregnant and you're alone. No, I said, finding my strength. I'm angry because I'm brilliant and you're a thief. The room erupted. Patricia tried to salvage the situation, suggesting we open gifts. Mrs. Wellington politely declined to stay, pressing a business card into my hand before leaving. My direct number, she said quietly. Douglas will want to speak with you, but I wanted to meet you first. Any woman who can create something that impressive while training someone actively sabotaging her? That's someone I want to know better. The party dissolved quickly after that. Colleagues who'd avoided my eyes for months suddenly remembered my number. Amy from accounting hugged me. Jessica from HR whispered that there would be a full investigation. Melissa sat surrounded by unopened gifts, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered the nights I'd spent in the hospital, worried about the project, trusting her to keep things running. The mornings I'd come back to work, still weak, to find she'd already scheduled meetings with the board that I wasn't invited to. Nora, wait, she called as I headed for the door. Please, we can work this out. I'll share credit. Share credit for my work? I laughed bitterly. How generous. I'm about to be a mother. Then maybe you should model better behavior, I said. Like not stealing from people who trust you. Monday morning came faster than expected. Douglas Wellington himself was waiting in his office when I arrived, along with the head of HR and legal. Ms. Sullivan, he stood, extending his hand. I owe you an apology, and a significant correction to your career trajectory. What followed was surreal. They'd conducted a thorough investigation over the weekend. Every file, every timestamp, every piece of code had been analyzed. Melissa had indeed accessed my private repository while I was hospitalized, downloaded everything, and systematically presented my work as her own. The algorithm you developed will save us approximately $12 million in the first year alone, Wellington said. More importantly, the bias correction component positions us as industry leaders in ethical AI. You deserve full credit and compensation. What about Melissa? I asked. Terminated, HR confirmed. With cause. She's forfeited all benefits and bonuses. Legal is considering whether to pursue criminal charges for corporate espionage. I don't want to destroy her life, I said. She has a baby coming. Compassionate of you, Wellington noted. But actions have consequences. She didn't just steal code. She stole your reputation, your promotion, your financial advancement. That's not a small thing. He was right. The promotion Melissa had earned with my work came with a 40% salary increase. Stock options. Bonuses. Money I could have used for my mother's medical bills, for the house down payment I'd been saving for the life I'd been building. We'd like to offer you the position of Chief Innovation Officer, Wellington continued. It's a new role we're creating specifically for someone with your talents. You'd report directly to me, have your own team, and full autonomy to pursue the kind of groundbreaking projects you've already shown you can deliver. The salary he named made me dizzy. It was more than double what Melissa had been making in the stolen position. Additionally, he continued, we're filing patents for your algorithm with you as the sole inventor. The company will retain usage rights, but you'll receive royalties for any external licensing. Yes. Yes, of course. Excellent. There is one more thing. He looked uncomfortable. My wife was quite impressed with you. She suggested, and I agree, that you might benefit from some public speaking coaching. Not because you lack presence, he added quickly, but because brilliance like yours should be shared widely. Conference keynotes, TED Talks, that sort of thing. We want you to be the face of Wellington Technologies' innovation efforts. 6 months later, I stood on stage at the International Tech Conference, presenting my algorithm to an audience of 500. In the front row sat Mrs. Wellington, who'd become an unexpected mentor and friend. She caught my eye and smiled. The key to ethical AI, I explained to the rapt audience, is recognizing that our data reflects our biases. We can't simply optimize for efficiency without considering equity. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Melissa had viewed my profile. Again, she'd been doing that a lot lately, according to the premium features. Never reaching out, just watching from the sidelines as my career soared. I'd heard through the grapevine that she'd had her baby, a girl, that she'd struggled to find work with the termination on her record, that her husband had taken a second job to make ends meet. Part of me felt sorry for her. A larger part remembered that she'd made her choices. After my talk, a young woman approached. Ms. Sullivan? I'm starting my career in tech, and I wondered if you had any advice. Be brilliant, I said. Work hard. Help others. And always document your code. She laughed, thinking it was a joke about version control. But I was thinking about Melissa, about trust and betrayal, about how sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply succeeding despite those who tried to tear you down. My algorithm was being implemented across Wellington Technologies. My name was on the patent. My bank account reflected my worth. And somewhere, a woman who'd thought stealing was easier than creating was living with the consequences of that choice. Oh, and one more thing, I told the young developer. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Especially if they're showing you at a baby shower. She looked confused, but nodded. Someday, maybe she'd understand. For now, I had a future to build. One line of code, one innovation, one ethical choice at a time. The notification lingered on my phone. Melissa had viewed my profile again. This time, I blocked her. Some bridges, once burned, weren't worth rebuilding. But the view from the other side? That was worth everything.